The NBA playoffs are here, and I'm getting my bets in on FanDuel. Talk to me, Chuck GPT. What do you know?
All sorts of interesting stuff, even Charles Barkley's greatest fear.
Hey, nobody needs to know that.
New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
21 plus and present in select states. Must be first online real money wager. $5 deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
And welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. Well, the managers from the House of Representatives walked over the historic articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas this week over to the Senate, only for Democrats there to quickly dismiss them without even conducting any trial. What does that say about their indifference to the catastrophe that is occurring daily on our U.S. southern border? Well, joining us now to discuss this and so much more is the former acting commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, Mark Morgan. Mark, it's great to have you here.
Rita, as always, I love being on your show. Thanks for having me.
It's stunning. They didn't even want to hear anything to do with this potential impeachment trial. They just dismissed it outright. What does that say to you? That they don't even want to have the American public aware of all the details that are happening at the border?
Yeah, I tell you, Rita, look, I just wrote down what you said. Stunning. I think it's a great adjective to describe. Think about this. They stopped this process without hearing a single argument or a single piece of evidence. And to put that in perspective, this is the first time in our nation's history where the Senate, after the House walked over articles of impeachment to the Senate, that they have not gone forward with the trial against a public official. And the irony here is that one of the very reasons why they impeached Secretary Mayorkas is because he just obliterated the Constitution. And that's exactly what the Senate has done by not holding this trial. And to your point, this is the American people should be insulted, and they should be stunned and frustrated because they deserve this trial. They deserve to hear and watch the evidence themselves. So regardless of how the vote ends up, whether the Senate convicts or not, the American people can make up their own mind, and then they can vote appropriately come November this year. But the Senate kept all that from the American people, and we know exactly why they did.
Why do you believe they did?
Because they know, Rita, they know that the overwhelming majority of evidence is going to show that what's happened, the chaos and lawlessness happening at our border was intentional, and that Secretary Mayorkas served as its chief architect. He abandoned his oath of office. He just obliterated the Constitution. He refused to enforce the law. He made up new law, and he's lied to the American people in Congress. And you think about this, Chairman Mark Green, this wasn't something that they just looked at for a couple of days. Chairman Mark Green oversaw about a 5-month process of hundreds of witnesses, generated hundreds and hundreds of pages of material before they came to this conclusion. That was a legitimate process. These were legitimate charges, and the Senate should have, but they didn't because they know the evidence will clearly show what Mayorkas did and that he should be fired.
Getting into even the articles, one of them is not abiding by federal law, that there are laws that are on the books that Mayorkas clearly, willfully is not following up on. The other one, as you mentioned, is also lying to Congress. Both of those are impeachable.
That's absolutely right. And just a couple of quick examples of that. So one, unlawful use of parole. I mean, that's happening every day. Parole is supposed to be done on a this is very important, case-by-case basis for significant humanitarian benefit or public benefit. Right now, if you're from one of 4 countries, just being born in that country satisfies the requirement of being paroled in. That's not right. And to give you an example of just what the detrimental impacts are, so Laken Riley, The individual that allegedly killed her was paroled in by Secretary Mayorkas. There was no case-by-case basis for that guy. He was just born from one of the 4 countries. They said that if you are, then you get allowed into this country. The other one is detention. He is literally right now, he's 85% of those individuals illegally interned that are being apprehended are being released in the United States, and they're not being detained as required by law. That's just a couple of examples.
You know, it's also stunning, too, because I think about that they made a calculation, Mark, in the Democratic Party that they would rather sort of take the hit of the blowback of not doing a trial whatsoever and just sort of outright dismissing it than the damage that could cause if suddenly everybody covers the hearings, because it would be historic that there would be an actual hearing or trial. And then, of course, the Republicans would show all the issues at the border, show those images of the border, talk about the kids that are missing, the women and children that are being human trafficked. They decided that they'd rather take a political hit than really show what's really happening at the border. That, to me, I think speaks volumes.
Yeah, look, I think you're at 100% correct. I couldn't have said it better myself. Either way, they were going to take a political hit. They just decided the lowest political hit they were going to take was by not holding the trial. And you know what? As the media cycle is, let's be honest, is that in a day and a half, it'll never be mentioned again. Right? I mean, it'll go on. So look, I think they're right. I think they took a political risk that was fairly straightforward risk, because the risk going forward with the trial, I think, would actually make its way all the way to the ballot in November of this year. I think not holding the trial, it'll be dismissed. It'll be forgotten about, rolled under the carpet. And I think it will make very little difference, unfortunately.
Do you think, though, that maybe the issue of impeachment maybe gets, thrown to the wayside, but the issue of the border isn't going to go away? No. Obviously, Democrats are hoping it is. But if you look at some of the polls, in many polls, it's the top issue for American voters. So are they naive to think that the issue is going to go away?
I don't think they're naive. I think they're scrambling around, right? I mean, I think this goes to your point. I think this is exactly why they didn't hold the trial, because they know that they're upside down on this issue. And they know had they held the trial, it would have showed how this administration intentionally took the most secure border in a lifetime and unsecured it and caused the chaos and lawlessness. Drugs are pointed across, criminals are pointed across, national security threats are pointed across. We've talked about that ad nauseum. And finally, the American people are waking up. And to your point, that's why you're seeing it at the polls. So I think right now they're scrambling and they're trying to do everything they can to counter what the American people are finally seeing. I think that's why they're having the secret discussions with Mexico. We talked about that, how the Mexican president has started to do a couple of things because he knows he doesn't want President Trump back in office, because he knows what President Trump's going to do. And so I think they know what's happening. I think they're scrambling.
How much damage has this wide open southern border caused?
That's such a great question, Rita. And I was just talking to a colleague about that, is that what happens is I think right now, and I get it, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but, because American people are busy in the media, I get it, attention span's short, and we tend to focus on just the close 3-meter target, we'd say in the military, right? The close, what's happening now. We cover what happened today. Tomorrow we'll cover what happened that day. The issue is how is what's happening today, to your point, going to impact us 5, 10, 15 years from now? And I'm telling you, this crisis is going to impact our country for decades to come. Decades. We talk about the additional criminal element that's in our country. We're talking about the Venezuelan gangs that are taking hold. Are we going to have another MS-13? We talk about the national security threats are here. We're talking about the drugs that are here. I mean, 2 million known gotaways. I mean, we have more illegal aliens in our country than any other time in our lifetime. What are going to be the challenges of removing those individuals that should be deported? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And then think about this. The number of illegal aliens we have here, I mean, they're going to continue to be a financial burden that taxpayers are going to have to foot for decades to come.
Yeah, and how do we locate these people, too? I mean, that's the issue, too. Even if we have a law and order president that comes in after the next election, how do you locate suddenly 10 million plus people?
Again, another great question. I'll give you an example. Right now, We have over 1 million illegal aliens that have gone through due process, more due process than any other country on the face of the planet would give somebody that illegally entered our border. But 1 million have gone through that entire process, and they've been ordered removed by a judge. We have 1 million. We know, and this isn't hyperbole, we know that we have hardcore criminals illegally in this country, murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, and gang members. How do I know that? Because in the last 36 months, ICE alone has arrested 163,000 criminal aliens in this country, including 4,700 murderers and over 8,000 gang members. So we're going to have our hands full, but we can do it. I get asked all the time, how are we going to remove millions of illegal aliens? This is my position, one at a time. And I say that because we can't give up. We can't just say, hey, because there's so many, we're never going to be able to. No, we can do this. We need a strategy. We need a whole government approach. It's going to take some time. We're going to start with those that have final order removal and criminals, but everybody is going to be on the plate to be removed.
And, there's been some stories of late, too, just as you talked about the Jose Ibarra. That is the guy, of course, from Venezuela, who is now, of course, accused of killing Laken Riley. They're the nursing student in Georgia. There's a lot of cases like that, and a lot of these coming from Venezuela. Talk about how dangerous that is, because a lot of them seem to have ties to Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang.
Yeah, look, and I was just talking about this a couple of days on another show. Here's the issue. Remember, America, sometimes we have a short memory. MS-13 took hold in this country because of illegal immigration. And MS-13, we were way behind on recognizing it, and they developed into the most powerful, violent transnational gang in our country. And now my concern is with Venezuela, I feel like this history is repeating itself. And look, to say, and right now Venezuela, the difference is that we know those coming over from Venezuela, they're already active gang members, right? They're already criminals, and they're coming over here. And if we don't recognize this, and if we don't stop this, we could very easily see the next MS-13 type gang, transnational gang, start to develop in this country. But Rita, I'll go back to the 2 million known gotaways. And why do we have a gotaway? Because the majority of those illegal entering, they literally turn themselves over to Border Patrol because they know they're going to get processed and released. But even under this administration, if they apprehend a hardcore criminal, they're going to remove them. And so who do you think's among the gotaways? Because they know that even under this administration, they'll get removed. We have literally allowed untold numbers of murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, and gang members into this country. That's why we say what's happening impacts every aspect of our nation's safety and national security.
President Trump took some heat from people saying when he made the comments, well, they're emptying out their prisons. Are they emptying out their prisons in some of these countries?
Yes. And look, this is what's so frustrating. It was the same thing back in the 2015-16 campaign. It was the same thing in the 2020 campaign cycle, same thing now. If you look at the substance of what President Trump says, he is absolutely correct. It's always his tone, right? That's the issue. I get so frustrated. They're always concerned about how he says it, the tone of what he says, the harshness of what he says. But if you actually took sound bites of what he said and then sound bites of what Democrat presidents have said in the past and those running for president have said, it's indistinguishable between candidates of the right or left party. I mean, there have been comments that Chuck Schumer and Obama and then Senator Biden have said in the past that I have asked people, hey, who do you think said that? And every single time they said, oh, well, President Trump said that, and it was false. This is about his tone. It's not about the substance because he's correct. Just like he's correct what he calls MS-13 animals. But, of course, what are the headlines? The headlines are Trump calls migrants, vulnerable migrants, animals. No, that's not what he said. He called MS-13 animals. And guess what, Rita? They are.
Well, and then on the flip side, we've seen a president, the current one, who seems to be so caught up in PC, where he essentially apologized to the killer of Laken Riley, saying, oh, no, I should not have used the phrase illegal. That's what he used during the State of the Union. And a lot of people wish he even used a much stronger term than that, to your point. And then the next day he comes out and says, no, I should have said undocumented. And then some said, no, you should have said newcomer. I mean, the semantics, you just must be rolling your eyes, Mark Morgan.
I am, and you're right. I watched that. So I watched the State of the Union, and then I watched the Sunday talk show, I believe it was. You should have said, non-citizen. Think about this for a moment. Everybody listening, think about this. So we had the President of the United States. We had an American citizen, this beautiful girl with her whole life ahead of her, was allegedly killed by an illegal alien. And during the State of the Union address, he does two things. One, he mispronounces her name. He calls her Lincoln instead of Laken Riley. And then he uses the term illegal, which is, by the way, the correct term. And on the Sunday talk shows, what does he do? He apologizes for using illegal alien, which is a statutory definition, and he does not apologize for actually mispronouncing her name. That's the contrast, and that's the difference between the vote come November.
Well, and also, as you talk about, too, not just mispronouncing, then he didn't even, as far as we know, hasn't called the family. Nope. Same thing happened with Jonathan Dillard, the officer who was sadly killed in New York. He didn't call the family. Trump goes and visits the family, went to the wake. It's this sort of disconnect from what is really dangerous, as we're talking about. I mean, we have to appreciate our men and women in blue. I know you understand it. You've been a lawman for so many years, Mark. Your background's incredible. And you look at also the disconnect also when there's a migrant crime. He doesn't want to spotlight it whatsoever because it goes right back to the border.
That's exactly right. And this is exactly why the governor of New York, when she attended the fallen officer from NYPD, is that she was told to leave. That's the contrast. That's the difference right now, right? That's the difference between the Democratic Party, who supports what's going on, who supports the assault on our police officers, who supports movements like Black Lives Matter, who supports defund the police, who supports, quote, social justice reform and no cash bail that releases hardcore criminals back in the streets to reoffend and claim additional American victims. That's what we're voting for this November, Rita.
Yeah, there is so much at stake. I absolutely agree. I feel it is such a pivotal election, and the contrast is pretty clear. The other issue is also fentanyl, too. You brought this up before, Mark. You look at how, 100,000 Americans every single year, and this president, I think he's mentioned fentanyl, at least publicly. I can count it on one hand. That's the most. That's in all his time.
Yep. Look at this. And right now, and let's call this black and white here. Right now, this is what I keep saying. So the Democrats caused this problem. We know it. But the Republicans, they're failing to fix it. The Republicans right now are once again showing a lack of political courage, strength, and will to do the right thing. Speaker Johnson right now has totally reversed course. I believe he's lied to the American people because where is this? He's actually supporting giving billions of dollars to secure, defend, and protect other countries' borders, but not our own. We passed the House, and the irony here is the House passed H.R. 2 10 months ago. That was under Speaker McCarthy. It's the strongest piece of border security legislation, Rita, that's ever been passed. It actually provides a policy path forward. And instead of holding the line like he said he would, Speaker Johnson now is walking back from that, redoing it, watering it down, and pushing it, trying to push it as a separate bill back to the Senate. No, the Senate has had HRT for 10 months. What we should be doing is saying we're not moving an inch with Israel, Ukraine, unless we attach HR 2 to it. That's the deal. That's the leverage. You want Ukraine and Israel? Then we want HR 2. That's what we should be doing. And he's walking back from that, Rita.
Do you feel that there's so many fires going on in the world right now? I mean, you look at Israel, you look at everything that's going on in Ukraine, and had they really addressed it, I also agree with you. I think Republicans also need to make it clear because you constantly still hear the Senate, at least Democrats in the Senate, I should say, especially saying, oh, look what we have. We have this bill. Well, as you know all too well, that bill is a much weaker bill than H.R. 2. Yep. It doesn't have all the protections, and it basically codifies, I think it's like 5,000 illegals a day that's codifying illegal behavior. Do you think the Republicans need to do much better messaging and saying, wait a minute, let's be clear? Where are the pounding of the fists on this? They're kind of getting caught in semantics, and the American public, they just want to know that they're safe.
That's right. That's why I say the Langford bill was a joke. The Langford bill was not a meaningful border security bill. And I'll give you one example. Any bill that does not immediately end catch and release It's not a meaningful border security bill. The Langford bill didn't do that, plus a whole bunch of other things. You enumerated one of those, Rita. And I'm so frustrated they call this a bipartisan. 4 Republican senators voted for it. There were actually more Democrat senators that voted against it than Republicans voted for it. And let's be honest, the 4 Republicans that voted for it were rhinos. And look, part of me, I think Langford was set up by McConnell to do this. Because remember, at the end, McConnell didn't even support the bill that Langford put on. So first of all, I disagree that the calling this a bipartisan bill, but I go back to the typical thing. H.R. 2 was passed 10 months ago. Strong border security bill. It goes over to the Senate. What do? Because the Democrats say no, we don't like it. They just rolled over, and then they started negotiating with themselves, and they produced this crappy, meaningless bill going forward. And now, after Speaker Johnson said he was going to hold the line on H.R. 2, what's he doing? He's doing the same thing that the Senate did. He's rolling over. He's pushing forth a watered-down H.R. 2 bill, and instead of attaching it to Israel-Ukraine funding, he's doing it as a separate bill. He's just pushing away all the leverage they have. I do not understand it.
What do you think is behind that, then? What do you think is the reason?
I don't know. And you know what? But that's a good question, Rita. I'm not a politician, and I'm glad I'm not one. I don't want to be. But there's something going on there that I don't know. And look, I'm not in a position right now to impugn their motives because I don't know what those motives are. All I know is what they're doing is a joke. And once again, the Republicans are caving and they're rolling over. Look, we're never going to have more leverage than we have right now. Number one, we have the worst border security crisis in our lifetime. As you mentioned earlier, it's topping the polls across the board. Americans are finally waking up with respect to the chaos and lawlessness that happened. That's leverage number one. Number two, we know that they want funding for Ukraine. And so we have 2 significant leverage points right now. I do not understand why they're not using this leverage. We'll never have a better point right now to pass meaningful border security legislation than right now today. And I believe Speaker Johnson is just absolutely walking away from it.
And meantime, the cost, as we're looking at the price of what it's costing America at the border, you know this all too well, but this was amazing. There was a study this week also, Mark, that came out. And it is saying that it's costing $150 billion with a B annual cost of illegal immigration to Americans. And this group says that the total, it's about $1,100 every year per taxpayer. I mean, that's stunning. I mean, they should be putting that out, blaring it, saying, are you happy that you're paying for illegal immigration? You want to pay everybody $1,100, every taxpayer in America who's working hard, their money, and you see what's going on in Chicago and places going, hey, what about us? I mean, there's so many homeless veterans, there's so many homeless Americans who would love to have $1,100.
That's exactly right. Look, so the Federation of American Immigration Reform have put out that study, but of course the liberal mainstream media, they don't even give 1 second to it. Chairman Mark Green, during his 5-6 month impeachment process, 2.5 years in the administration, I think he said taxpayers had already paid almost $500 billion in support of the chaos and loss that's happening because of this administration. Yet it barely registers in the media at all. And you're right, we rarely talk about it. Even on conservative platforms, because there's so much to talk about. There's so many negative effects because of what's happening right now. There's not enough time to talk about it all. But the financial impact is significant. The criminal impact, the drugs, the national security threat. We could go on and on.
Yeah, you're right, sadly. And meanwhile, the border is still open. And this president is at least in office for at least a few more months. It's like you can't even imagine how much more damage and how much more issues. And the fact, again, that they just discounted those impeachment articles so quickly, to me, I thought it was a disgrace. It really, really is just astounding what's happening at this moment. Well, everybody, be sure to subscribe and share to this powerful podcast. Mark Morgan, you have such terrific insights. I adore you. And I also have such respect for your incredible background in law enforcement. Thanks for all you do to keep us safe and for voicing and fighting the good fight, which is so important to protect our country.
Well, Rita, I feel the same about you. You're in the fight, too. And And if it wasn't for platforms like yours, we wouldn't be getting the truth, facts, and data out there to really educate the American people. So thanks for what you do.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.
Hello, folks. Larry Kudlow here. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II, one that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.